Hello, listeners. This is Kat, and welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfics. This will be the reading of the one-shot entitled Parallels. Here's the summary. You're doing it again. He's not Oboro. Then why does he keep acting like Oboro? Aizawa has seen Oboro in the most trivial of things ever since he died. It only becomes a problem when it's his problem child that starts reminding him. There's this metaphor that stuck in Aizawa's mind as a kid. He was 16, in and out of Nezu's office, trying to prove his continued worth in the hero course, everything always a bit too much to handle. Sure, he never faltered, not outwardly, and if he did, it never stuck. He grew an indifference to chaos, a disinterest for things going wrong. Which they did, regularly. Every time a new disaster struck, Aizawa shook it off, water off a duck's back. Nothing to worry about, nothing to panic about. He was safe from immediate emotional overload, as long as he just didn't acknowledge how terrifying everything always was. He could lock all of it away, plaster on his blankest expression, and off he went. The most unbothered, unfazed student in the whole of UA, Aizawa happily accepted the reputation, if only to enforce his own fantasy. Pretend it was working, and that he wasn't nosediving into a breakdown by the end of his first year. He was surviving. He was doing well in his little make-believe world, getting on with it, uncomplaining. Until Oboro. His death was the deal-breaker. The collapse of all he'd built up. So much pain so quickly that Aizawa had wished more than anything he could be numb. He could just fade away. Disappear into his own head, or maybe underneath his own building. Sometimes he'd wake to screaming. Such an agonized, horrible sound, he'd think. It was always him doing the screaming, of course. He'd realized that eventually. Hizashi would hold him while he sobbed so hard he threw up, scrape his hair back from his face so it wouldn't stick to his skin. Kind, gentle hands that shook with his own guilt, his own mortified tremors. Aizawa never knew what to say, so he said nothing at all. For weeks. A month and a half passed before he did more than scream. After that, trying to go back to normal was impossible. Everywhere he looked he saw Oboro, in wide, genuine grins, in every too loud shout, in every playful jab, and in the clouds. Aizawa hated the sky, for a long time. The metaphor was one that Nezu gave him to consider one afternoon, something he calmly announced like it wasn't about to change Aizawa's entire world view. The world, he'd said, pausing to take a sip of tea, is a mirror for our emotions. Like he knew that everywhere Aizawa looked, he saw Oboro. Like if he could just be less sad all the time, maybe he'd stop thinking about it every moment of every day. Eventually he got through school, moved on with his life and his career, blocked out all the reminders and settled into his indifference all over again. Hizashi had always and would continue to see through that mask. There's no denying it, since despite Aizawa's inability to express his emotions, Hizashi managed to con him into a relationship and a very happy marriage. The weight of the space Oboro should occupy rarely intrudes on their home, as busy as it constantly is. Zawa? Aizawa looks up from the paper he's been pretending to mark, shaking off the memories. Eri has paused in her drawing, a green crayon grasped in her tiny grip. Her artwork isn't always the clearest, but Aizawa knows exactly whose hair she'll be coloring next, if the rest of the drawings up around the room are anything to go by. Yeah, kid? You look sad. She frowns, and Aizawa sighs, running a hand over his face. His eyes itch, gritty and begging him to nap. Maybe a little, he admits, shaking his head. Don't worry about me, Eri. I'm all right. Maybe Izuku can make you happy, she tells him, patting his hand assuringly. He always makes me smile, so maybe he can make you smile too. Eri turns back to her drawing, not expecting a response. Now she's settled into his home properly, her attention span has been gradually returning to where it should be for a child her age. He's grateful for it both because it's a sign she's becoming more relaxed, less in need of constantly watching, and also because it means he won't have to lie to her now. Midoriya Izuku is a ray of sunshine. When he'd first met him, Aizawa hadn't been quite sure what to make of him. All the hallmarks of an extremely hard worker, but with none of the control, the refinement he'd expect, not to mention his grades, beyond average. An analytic mind wrapped in the goodness and idealistic thinking to make an excellent spotlight hero. Too nervous for it to be arrogance, too determined for it to be laziness. Then there's that weird relationship with All Might. Aizawa's not an idiot. He knows when something is happening with his students behind his back. There are inherent similarities between Midoriya and All Might's quirks, sure, but they stop at strength and speed. They don't present the same way, and Midoriya's quirk is more suited to mentoring in the fine control it needs than in brute strength. Aizawa makes a note to ask Hisashi to give Midoriya some tips on controlling a destructive quirk. He doesn't want the kid breaking any more bones under All Might's dodgy methods. He peels off the sticky note, drawing a neat smiley on the one beneath it, and sticking it to Eri's forehead, making her giggle. Despite Midoriya's confusing demeanor and even more confusing history, Aizawa's grown to like the kid. But sometimes, he finds himself slipping. Midoriya will smile, so big and bright that it consumes his face, shiny and dazzling and totally in character. He'll band together with his classmates in group exercises with growing confidence, always dead set on making sure everyone is doing what's most helpful to them and the rest of the team. There's sleepy good morning Aizawas and thank yous handwritten in his neatest scrawl, tucked into the final pages of essays. Kindness is pressed in every action, every word, and Aizawa can't quite bear to look at him. He's so much like Oboro, and every time he notices something else, there's this twinge in his chest, a pinch, the tiniest jab, sharp longing for a life missed out on. Midoriya is quieter than Oboro ever was, but it doesn't stop Aizawa from seeing brief flashes of almost white-blue hair instead of his student's green. Midoriya has never joked with him. He's only recently gotten over formalities enough to banter, but Aizawa still lets out reluctant chuckles and rare smiles. He's only said the wrong name once. Midoriya left him a note wishing his condolences 2 days later. Midoriya's not naive enough to think the disappearance of any record of Oboro's presence at UA was due to pleasant means. Nezu must have given him access to the files, or the footage, or maybe he already knew. Aizawa wouldn't be surprised. He knew exactly who Aizawa was as soon as he saw him. So he's probably watched the sports festival footage before. The note is written on sky blue paper, and it's covered in delicate little cloud doodles. Every word is heartfelt, and it's signed with an assurance that he doesn't mind if Aizawa slips up sometimes. He keeps it locked away from the rest of Midoriya's notes, safe from sticky little fingers and sunlight. Every now and then, he'll look at it. When Midoriya's in the hospital again, or it's an especially cloudy day. Once again, Aizawa finds himself lost on what to say. This kid, who spawned from his dead friend's memory, what is he supposed to do with him? There's a knock at the door, and Aizawa stands to put his work away. Hizashi's voice floats down the hallway, joined by Midoriya's softer, happy murmur. Eri drops her crayon. Getting down from the chair, he can see she's itching to go greet him, but she still stops and looks back at him. Go on, he encourages her, smoothing back her hair. You don't need to ask for permission to be excited, Eri. Eri doesn't waste time, bouncing off across the room, only getting as far as the door before Midoriya is scooping her up. Izuku! She cheers, hugging him tightly. Hey, Eri! He responds with equal enthusiasm, spinning them both in a circle until Eri giggles out a joyful stop. Aizawa eyes her first teetering steps in case she falls, but Midoriya has already pressed a steadying hand to her shoulder. As seeing Midoriya doing anything always does, shooting nostalgia hits him like a brick wall. Oboro used to do that. Sure, calm hands on shaking shoulders, a crutch for weak knees and exhaustion. Hisashi is watching him closely. Aizawa can feel the warmth of his gaze even while he watches Eri show Midoriya her drawing of them. His presence settles beside him, an arm wrapping around his waist. You're doing it again. Aizawa hums. Hisashi pokes him in the ribs, forcing him to look him in the eyes, with a grip on his jaw. Tutting, he rubs a thumb over his cheek until Aizawa concedes, leaning into the touch. He's not Oboro. Then why does he keep acting like Oboro? Aizawa knows the answer is harsh, rough. He knows Hisashi doesn't deserve the weight of his frustration with the whole thing. It's not his fault, Aizawa can't stop, nor that he never healed from Oboro's death. I don't know, Hisashi breathes out, a rare whisper only for Aizawa's ears. But does it really matter? I can't look at Midoriya without remembering. Then you need to stop trying to forget, and realize that maybe remembering isn't a bad thing. It's scathing, soothed by the affectionate caress he gets along with the words. Hizashi is unwavering in his eye contact, not letting Aizawa escape to his thoughts. How could it possibly be good? His voice cracks, throat tight. You loved Oboro. Shota, we loved him, and he loved us. Hizashi smiles, and Aizawa fights the urge to kiss the smile lines around his eyes that appear. It's one thing being like this in front of Midoriya. He won't subject the poor kid to even more PDA, even if Hizashi is very kissable. But neither of us got to love him very long. Yes, but... Hizashi shushes him. Midoriya is not unloved, but he tiptoes around his teachers like one wrong move and it'll all be over. It's not untrue. Other than Aizawa himself, he doesn't think he's ever seen Midoriya attempt to talk to a teacher about extra work or debate his scores or ask a question unrelated to current work. He doesn't interrupt class, always waits to ask for things or sorts it out himself. It's like he tries his best to actively fly under the radar, go unnoticed despite never acting out. He is easy to love, in the way that Oboro was easy to love. Aizawa frowns, and Hizashi laughs, pressing his nose to his. You adore him, you silly old man. Maybe, he grumbles, ducking his head like it'll save him from Hizashi seeing his smile or his burning ears. You do. Stop pretending like he's not important, when we both know you keep all his gifts and go to him first when he's hurt. I don't pick favorites. His attempt at protest is met with a pointed stare, and he gives in with a sigh. He's a problem child. He is, and you still care so much, Hizashi tells him. He's quiet for a moment, letting Aizawa sit in all he said. He can tell there's more, even if his husband lets him have a grace period to watch Midoriya play with Eri. Eri is crouched behind the sofa, barely holding in her laughter, face bright red with a strain. Midoriya monologues about how much of a good hider she must be to evade him for so long, really getting into the role, checking in impossible hiding spaces. Eventually he gets to the sofa, but he only looks behind cushions, stopping to listen for noise cupping his ear. Oh? He says, leaning onto the back of the sofa. Do I hear something behind the sofa? Eri takes her chance, jumping up so Midoriya falls backward with a sharp, ah! She runs around, landing on top of him, with a giggle so full that Aizawa wishes he'd been recording just so he can listen to the sound when he's sad. Midoriya tickles her sides, his own laughter melding with hers. It's joy, unfiltered, unashamed. Love him. Aizawa startles, glancing at Hizashi with raised brows. Don't look at me like that, Hizashi reprimands, shoving him. Look after him like you couldn't look after Oboro. The words hit hard in his chest, knocking the air from his lungs. He grunts in reply, an acknowledgement that he at least heard, but his search for words comes up empty. If he does this, if he accepts that Midoriya is too much alike to Oboro to not care about instinctually, he'll have to commit, give in to that urge he's avoided over and over again, to care for his students beyond getting them through school alive and well. Aizawa will go all in, because that's what he does when he loves. It's why Hizashi gets away with so much shit when he would never allow anyone else to get near his level of shenanigans. It's why Eri lives with him, why he called in a million favors, why he skipped sleep for days to make sure she stayed safe. If he does the same for Midoriya, then he's done for. The kid has no self-preservation. He's clearly got a savior complex and some trauma to unravel. 1,000 secrets he'll need to extract through whatever means necessary. From All Might, obviously. He'd never hurt. Aizawa freezes. He's doing it already, scheming, thinking. His surprise manifests in a burst of shocked laughter, hand pressed to his lips. It evolves into knuckles between teeth, trying to mitigate the need to devolve into hysterics. By the time he's calmed down, Hizashi is looking at him all concerned and pouty. Aizawa sighs deeply, shaking his head. What if I can't do that? He asks. What if I just fail all over again? Hizashi wraps his long, all-encompassing arms around his shoulders, pulling Aizawa in close. He lets the tension drop from his muscles, pressing his face into the warmth of his husband's neck. Eri and Midoriya are still playing, loud and boisterous, like, well, kids. Neither of them are like this apart, and Aizawa aches with it. There's a reason they need the other's enthusiasm to get like this. They stay like that for so long, Aizawa almost forgets he's asked a question. His eyes flutter shut, warm and safe and comfortable. Izashi's breath stirs his hair, a steady reminder of his presence. You won't fail again, Shota. The whisper is barely there at all, but it's so close that Aizawa can't avoid it, or the hitch in his chest it causes. You didn't even fail the first time. No, but... He's not Oboro, Shota, Hisashi interrupts harshly. He's Midoriya, and he's everything you loved about Oboro and more. Okay, he concedes. All right. You're right. Usually am. Aizawa ignores his snark, resting his head on Hisashi's shoulder so he can still watch Midoriya and Eri. The kid is letting Eri poke at the tiniest strand of black whip, the energy wrapping around her finger with gentle concentration. Restless excitement hums through him. There's so much to do. All right, listeners, this concludes the one-shot entitled Parallels. Personally, I'm a big fan of fics that explore more into the loss that Aizawa suffered when it comes to Oboro, and Hisashi as well, but this is obviously more Aizawa-centric. I'm eager to hear your thoughts and reactions as well, because I'm a big fan of these types of fics where authors put up comparisons between Midoriya and Oboro and, really forcing Aizawa to kind of confront some of those feelings. So I think the author did an incredible job with this. Let me know what you thought as well, though. If you liked it and you have an opportunity to slide over to AO3 and leave comments or kudos to the original author, I'm sure it would be much appreciated. And as always, thank you so much for listening.